Hey everyone, Samia Khan here with your Fox 10 News Now update. Hope you're having a lovely Thursday morning. I am joined by a very special guest, Brian Kilmeade, straight from Fox and Friends. When did you get into town?
I got into town 3 in the morning.
Wow.
The American Airlines thought it would be a good idea to delay their flight, leaving from Charlotte, and get it into Dallas whenever they had a chance. So instead of leaving at 10:30, we left at 12:30. And then I'm just glad they didn't cancel it. So I was able to get to town, wait for my bag, way too long, and then get into the Phoenician right down the block. And I'm going to be giving a speech there in a little while, but I wanted to stop by and see about this brand new network.
Yeah,
you guys are cutting edge. I love it.
We are cutting edge. This is Fox 10 News Now. I know the execs in New York watch this periodically, too, because we're the first of its kind.
Well, it's a great idea to watch the feeds that everybody gets and make it a television show.
Right, because we're getting in things constantly, and it's the source where you can go to whenever there's breaking news, for example, or when we have, you know, fun guests in studio. I can bring them over here and we can have a more in-depth discussion as opposed to what you guys are talking about on the morning show. We do obviously touch upon what you're talking about on the morning show as well, because I know you're in town because you wrote a new book, right?
Yeah, and in fact, I was very flattered that Rick and Andrew had a chance to read it, and it was Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, and you could take the word pirate, really put terrorists, and you could talk about Islamic extremists and talk about ISIS and Al-Qaeda today.
Right.
Well, back then it was the Tripoli, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. They all had these Islamic extremists who would capture crews, plunder their cargo, and take their ships and kind of terrorize people in the region, unless, of course, you decide to pay them off.
So you're saying there's this sort of parallel between
Absolutely.
what they experienced then and what we're experiencing now?
I mean, we have the conversation. It was written up. John Adams said that essentially he's meeting with the ambassador of Tripoli, which we all know is Libya today. Now it's the capital. And essentially they said that the Quran, you're an infidel because you're not, you don't follow Muhammad, you don't follow Islam. And because you're an infidel, that gives us the right to basically give you an opportunity to convert, or we are able to do what we want with you. And in many cases, it would be to not only imprison, but to enslave.
So similar in the way that ISIS sort of misinterprets the Quran and uses it to their advantage, uses it as a source of power to impose on these people who think they're being religious when in reality they're not.
And that's key, because this isn't about Muslims.
Yeah.
Because Muslims are getting it worse than anybody else. Their quality of life today and back then, under these brutal dictators, back then these terrorists, was terrible. And they were the ones paying the price. In fact, in the book I have a page on just all the tortures, because evidently they had trouble remembering them. So they would put little boxes of different tortures that people would go through who weren't, I guess, going to the letter of the Quran that they saw, or did things like tried to go to another country because their quality of life was terrible, especially if you were a woman. So what we found out is John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had a chance to deal with this ideology. And as you know, Jefferson was somebody who read the Quran. He actually knew the Quran. He tried to understand it because he had this curiosity about all religions, and said, basically, this is not the Quran I know.
Right.
And when they said, well, you have, if we do have the right to fight you, and if we die in battle, you still go to glory, and you're glorifying Allah. That's much like the suicide bomber we hear about today. So to see that Jefferson recommended we have to fight him and stand up for ourselves, Adams saw the wild look in their eye and saw the relentless way in this was going to pursue us, and said, America does not have the stomach for a long war. I'm going to just pay these guys off. And we did. For the longest time, our money was just going in the street. Like today would be extortion to the mob. Let me have my fish market in my deli, and I'll give you the money. You got my protection.
Similarly to the way ISIS is taking hostages and demanding money, but this time we're not complying with their demands.
When finally Jefferson becomes president in 1801, he said, I'm not really making the payments anymore. Communication wasn't as great as this. No Snapchat, Facebook. So he knew they were going to declare war. He just didn't know when. Well, it turns out it was almost immediately. And this is something that many people don't know, is the first country to declare foreign power to declare war on us was Tripoli, which we now know as Libya.
Wow.
So they did this thing called, symbolically, they would chop down your flagpole, and that meant we're at war. Our ambassador saw that. They said, hey, do you want to stay during our war, or do you want to leave? They said, I think I'll leave. And they left, and the war was on.
I want your take on something, because one of the things we kind of touched upon just now was this concept of ransom, or paying these, these guys off.
They called it tributes back then. We call it ransom.
Right. And one of the things I spoke with John McCain about last month was the case of Kayla Mueller, because she was a local girl from Prescott who was killed at the hands of ISIS. And one of the things we spoke about a little off camera was the fact that, yes, we have these rules in place. The government has these rules in place to not allow ransoms, but what happens when you have a family that's dealing with their loved one being there and they have the opportunity to potentially save this life? What's your take on that?
My take on that is it's horrible to say, but if you pay once, what about the next 10 people that are going to be captured because the word will go out that America pays?
Right.
How many people were not captured or abducted because they'll say an American, man, that never works out for us. They get mad, they hit us back, and they don't pay. So there's a lot of countries in Europe who take the easy way out. We have great special operators. I would say this. It's easy for me to sit here. It's not my family member. My family member, my instincts would be I'm going to get the money, I'm going to pay. But I do feel bad for the next 25 that are taken for that reason. And I would think that we have to give permission to do the black op operations that maybe freeze a Kayla rather than pays money, which more likely is 50-50 chance of actually getting the freedom.
Right, because you can't necessarily trust these people.
I mean, think about the life she had. She also had an opportunity, as you know better than anybody, to get out.
Right.
But she didn't want to do that because she wanted to get out on her own terms and didn't want to leave everybody behind.
Right.
So she, that's horrific. There's no winners there, but it is so apropos to my book, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. These are tough decisions to make. Some great men like John Adams said, we better write the check. And some other great men like Thomas Jefferson says, we have to fight him. But Thomas Jefferson didn't finish the job. It was James Madison that in 1815 had to go back and go for complete victory. That's what we need. The surge worked, but we didn't get complete victory. We pulled out too soon. Now, we had a victory, but not a complete victory, so therefore we had to go back again.
Well, obviously the battle against ISIS is a hot topic for the presidential candidates, for example. I know Ted Cruz right now is speaking in New Hampshire. In fact, I have this feed that I'm going to pull up right now that we can go ahead and just pull up and have in the background. But he's in New Hampshire. He's filing for the ballot. You obviously speak with a lot of these presidential candidates. What's your take on what they said, for example, on when it was Tuesday night on Fox Business Network?
I respect Rand Paul because he's been relatively consistent. He does not want us over there. He doesn't think it's our fight. And I think that there's no way that that's the right way to approach it. It drives John McCain crazy. It's not what Marco Rubio talked about. It's really not what Ted Cruz talked about, although he's more pulled back than Marco Rubio. And I think Donald Trump is coming around to the fact that we have to confront this evil. I don't think we should get involved in a Syrian civil war, but for me, it's pretty clear that ISIS has nothing to do with what happens in Syria. They're an Islamic extremist now mini country that's formulated, has an economy, a judicial system. They actually have a tax system. How we can allow this extremist country, this Islamic caliphate to exist is not in America's interest. And anyone who says, well, I don't want to get involved over there, I think is looking so short-sighted. Your Senator John McCain, not only looks at this and has opinions on it, he actually goes there. He went with the rebels. He wanted to arm the Free Syrian Army. Now, I don't know enough. I haven't been there. He believed there were enough people there who wanted to fight for freedom. I worry that a lot of those people would be squelched and plowed under, and then the Islamic mindset, Islamic extremist mindset would take over, which we now know as ISIS. But I ask you this question, and this is what I asked Marco Rubio. Senator Kaine of Virginia, Democrat. I said, after 9/11, we were hit. We knew exactly where we're going. We're going right to Afghanistan, and we're going to go after the Taliban who are harboring al-Qaeda, right? So if we're hit tomorrow and ISIS claims responsibility and we prove it, where are we going to hit? We're going to go right to Raqqa. So what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for Americans to die? Are we waiting for them to plot and plan? They have more money, they're more lethal and more organized than bin Laden ever was. So why are we waiting? We're leaving ourselves ripe to get hit, and we will hit back when motivated. But right now, the American people haven't been educated to know the level of this threat. You know, whatever you think about George Bush, whatever you think about Bill Clinton said America doesn't want any part of this. George Bush had a grenade handed to him 9 months in, and then he took his time to explain why to go into Iraq. That's what you have to do. If you're Barack Obama with these great communication skills and you explain to them that ISIS is the enemy, let me read you a few quotes. Let me tell you how they've combined forces with al-Qaeda and want to come here and put together, with their words, another 9/11 style attack. The American people are not stupid. Nobody wants a long war, but also nobody wants to be victims. And we want to do a preemptive strike on Raqqa. Why we're not doing it, I still don't get.
Right. It almost seems like the climate nowadays, I mean, we've talked about it here on News Now, it almost feels like ISIS makes Saddam Hussein look like a good guy, relatively speaking.
But you know, it's interesting. So I was talking to some of the Navy SEALs the other day, and they said, listen, Saddam Hussein was torturing his people like you would not believe. And a lot of these guys are the officers, part of ISIS, are the officers that Saddam Hussein had. They ran for their lives and are trying to come back. And some of the brutal tortures that ISIS is doing, that Saddam Hussein's people actually were doing under Saddam's leadership. So Saddam Hussein killed millions of people, and they were innocent. There were people that were committing suicide rather than even live in Iraq. Mm-hmm. They have a chance at liberation. They didn't take advantage of that chance. I don't think we did a good enough job with our post-war operations. But having said all that, we got it right in 2012. Having said all that, military textbooks will be written about what David Petraeus and General Odierno, along with Ambassador Crocker, did with this surge. So having said all that, we ended up like this war with the Tripoli Pirates, eventually getting it right. But we left, making it all blow up.
Mm-hmm. So your book, the Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, it's already out on shelves?
It's out for 1 week, and we just got word last night at around 11 o'clock that it'll be number 3 in the New York Times
list. Oh, wow,
list.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And it just goes to show you there's fundamentally people are patriotic. Even though you don't do this we're not lucky enough to do this for a living, a lot of people watching right now, everyone really cares about the country.
Right.
And I think that's why they embraced George Washington's book, and I think that's why they embrace this.
So, well, how do you manage to, co-host Fox and Friends every day and then write this book? You're fairly busy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but like you just section it off. It's okay. Now is free time. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to outline the chapters. Now I'm going to go summarize the chapters. Now I'm going to go blow up the chapters one by one. Then I'm going to go give it to my editor. The editor's going to come back. Next thing you know, 6 months, 8 months goes by. You got certain deadlines to hit. And as long as you don't look at the big picture, you look at this like in chunks, it's doable.
It's not as overwhelming. How many pages is the book?
The book is 235.
Okay.
And you'll run through it. And the way what Rick said to me, your esteemed anchor, is I wanted to read to get an idea what to talk about. My hope was for you to read it and realize this isn't written for the Yale professor. This is written for the everyday American.
Got it. A last question. Is there an audiobook version of it, or will there be?
Done. Took me 3 days. Read the whole book into a microphone in a small room, and it is out there, and that's a great question. If you want to get this personalized or anything like that, BrianKilmeade.com. He goes to my local bookstore, and after my local bookstore, I go there, show up once a week, and they'll say to Merry Christmas or whatever it is, and they're able to personalize and send out.
And it is holiday season, pretty much.
That's
the red cups are out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the red cup. I know none of the snowflakes.
Can I just say, really quickly, I'm a very devoted Starbucks fan. I have been since the early 2000s.
Right.
And every year, the red cup evolves. So after a few years, you can't just go back and repeat cups. I just think they were trying to be, minimalistic.
Oh, so you don't think it's a big deal? You don't think they're being anti-Christmas?
No, not at all. It's still red. It's still special. People still get excited. They still have the holiday beverages. And they still have coffee in the store that is blatantly written Christmas blend.
Well, my wife had a great idea, and it was for the person in front of her. She said, if you don't like the fact that it doesn't look like Christmas, when they ask you your name, say, my name is Merry Christmas. So on your cup, it'll say Merry Christmas.
Right. You can always do that.
Yes, you could do that. Listen, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I thought it was relatively funny that Donald Trump brought it up on the stump. Why? Because it turns out the most fervent evangelicals are in South Carolina. A poll came out that morning showing that Dr. Carson was ahead in South Carolina, so he wanted to reverse that.
Nothing surprises me when it comes to Donald Trump. Everything is strategic.
How do people here view him?
Well, it depends, because we'll have very intense viewers because we stream a lot of Donald Trump events live here, and we'll get the diehard Trump fans from all around the country and the world chiming in, and they're very passionate, and they hate every other candidate out there, and they will just talk about Trump 2016. But then there are the people that oppose Trump and trash him in the chat room and think this can't be serious. It depends on who you ask.
It does amazing. He does get ratings. Every time we put him on, he's great.
Insane.
He did SNL, biggest in 4 years. Yet you see a New York billionaire, yet he's exciting people in the South, he's inviting people in the West. So if you told me that New York was happy, because he's pretty popular in New York, fine. But when you tell me the whole country is taking notice, I have Democrats come up to me and say I'd go with that guy. You know why? We're desperate to get on the offensive and feel better about ourselves. And you got it up there, a guy who's gonna, he's gonna break some heads.
Right.
And let everybody know we're the world's superpower in trade and in the military. We're not going to take it anymore. And I think to a degree it's excited people.
Yeah, he's made more people excited in the primary race and these GOP presidential candidates. More people have been excited, I think, in 2015 than any other previous primary election.
Actually, and I can see you have your board over here with every candidate is out there, and still there's 15 candidates. And when you saw 8 on the main stage, all with compelling arguments, and then 4 on the pregame show, you got 2 sitting governors sitting there in the pregame show, and Democrats, doing a pretty good job. And Jindal and Governor Christie and Governor Huckabee, a successful Arkansas governor, and then you had Senator Santorum, who won Iowa last time, 13 states. There's a lot of talent out there.
There is. It's probably hard for anyone who wanted to run for president this time around because there's so much competition out there.
I don't know if W would have won this time. He was better than a candidate than John McCain and some others, but would he have been better than 14 others? I do think he's better than Jeb ever will be. Jeb might be a great president. He's just not a great candidate.
Yeah, you would think that he would have come out with some more personality, more, I don't even know what the right word is, but oomph, I guess, on Tuesday night. And it was, he was better, but it wasn't anything that stood out. No one left saying Jeb was the winner of that debate.
Some people are very natural. Governor Christie's an example, very natural. Senator Cruz, he's going to have a big debate. He's going to put that performance in. Marco Rubio is the Barack Obama of this session. So smooth, so concise, so smart. Great communicator with, is an attractive candidate for a lot of people. And there's Jeb Bush, who's asked, to me, he's forcing it. If you watch the way he gesticulates and it's not lined up with what he's saying, it reminds me of what I would do if I was unsure of my topics and I had to go address a big group. He knows his stuff, but for some reason, maybe it was the Trump attack, he seems to have lost his confidence. Even at his age, at his time, with a great track record as governor, and with his family, and he seems to have lost his confidence. If he does not win the nomination, it won't be because of his last name. And how many people would have said that?
That's true. I just think you're right. It's the lack of...
It's not over, but it's...
I think it's over.
You do think it's over?
I don't want to be mean, but, we've been talking about the presidential race here on News Now probably since June is when we started talking about it almost on a daily basis.
Right.
And back then, we were talking about Jeb Bush being the front runner, Scott Walker being close behind. Where's Scott Walker now?
Nowhere.
Exactly.
And he had an appearance with Jeb Bush, but it didn't work.
Donald Trump was kind of the game changer.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right. Maybe it was that Donald Trump got in his head.
Well, thanks so much. This is fantastic. I am
Thank
jealous
you.
of somebody with this much control and this much communication and all this programming at your fingertips.
Well, thank you, and I know you're off to the Phoenician now.
Yes, and then over to Sacramento, and then the Nixon Library, the Reagan Ranch, and then back home.
Full West Coast tour.
Absolutely.
All right, well, enjoy your time. It was so great chatting with you.
Okay, you can bring my plane around now. Okay?
All right, guys.
Thanks, Samia.
Thank you, and we're going to go ahead and watch Ted Cruz.